presentation. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Family Connection Night. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us this evening and are really excited to share this experience together as we all learn more about making the ask from some wonderful people who bring a wealth of knowledge in this area. We also hosted this session earlier in January and found that there was quite an interest in the topic. So here we are again. Before we get started, I will just quickly introduce myself since this is only my second Family Connection night and a lot of you have probably not met me yet. But my name is Kira Orendorf and I'm the project manager at Microboards Ontario. I help support families with setting up and incorporating their microboards. We do have an exciting project going on right now that I will briefly mention at the end of our session in case you might be interested. And Karen, if you wanted to give a quick intro of yourself, that would be great. And then we'll get started.
Thanks, Kira. My name is Karen. I've probably run into most of you at some point. I'm the Executive Director of Microboards Ontario, and I've been here for about 3 years now, and I have a long history working in the developmental services sector. So I am more than happy to be here to support you guys through this conversation tonight.
Thanks, Karen. And if anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, you can definitely put that in the chat. So tonight, our main focus will, of course, be on making the ask. But first, I'll start with a few quick introductions and we'll briefly talk about the importance of relationships. Then we'll get right into the questions and the conversations about making the ask, followed by some tips. We're also going to leave some time for questions at the end, as I mentioned. So please feel free to put those into the chat as they arise, or you can unmute your microphone at the end and ask your questions that way as well. So first, I'd like to introduce you to all of our lovely speakers. Welcome, Carol, Wendy, and Kelly. Thank you all very much for your time this evening. And we all know that it can be an intimidating thing to ask a friend, a family member, or someone important in your loved one's life to join their microboard circle or network. And during this workshop, you'll hear from families who've done it, how they asked, who they asked, and how it went. We'll also have an experienced facilitator, hi Kelly, who will provide some tips and strategies throughout. Carol and Wendy's adult children have microboards of their own, and in just a moment, you'll hear brief family stories from each of them about who their loved ones' microboards are made up of, when they were incorporated, and any other details that they'd like to share. So Carol and Wendy are also peer mentors at Microboards Ontario, where they share their knowledge and experiences and offer a listening ear to those who reach out, and we'll provide more details on that later in the presentation. Kelly is a consultant with over 30 years of experience in the developmental services sector, and she provides planning and facilitation services, creative housing solutions, guidance to local agencies, and mentorship to facilitators. Kelly helps people set up and incorporate their microboards and also sits on a microboard as well herself. So thank you everyone for being with us tonight. Just by way of a quick definition, a microboard is essentially a small group of people who are unpaid, and they are usually family and close friends who join together with someone who has a disability. They form a not-for-profit corporation, but really at its heart, a microboard consists of lasting and supportive relationships. So the group helps the person make decisions and supports them in living the life that they want, whatever that may look like for them. And what also makes a microboard unique is the fact that it's not temporary, it's permanent. So while the people involved may change, the microboard stays with the person for life, providing stability and ongoing support. And we all know that relationships are the most important component of a person's life. This is a key value and principle of microboards. And relationships clearly have so many benefits for us all, as you can see on the slide. Every person has gifts to contribute to their friends, family, and community, and everyone deserves an opportunity to do so through relationships. So before we dive into all the details, all of the questions that we have surrounding making the ask, I want to take a moment to introduce you to two wonderful speakers and moms, Carol and Wendy. As I mentioned earlier, both of their daughters have microboards and have had them for quite a while, so they bring a lot of experience to the table. Carol and Wendy are great examples of how inviting people to join a microboard doesn't have to be intimidating. In fact, it can be a really positive, even enjoyable experience, and a successful one too. So if you could start by telling us a little bit about what Nat's microboard looks like today, Carol. So who's part of it, how it's going, that would be a great place to begin. And then we'll get into our question portion after Wendy's had an opportunity to introduce Evie's microboard as well. So with that, Carol, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Kara. Yeah, we've had our microboard since February 14th, 2019. And now it runs, we have meetings quarterly. In the beginning, it wasn't so. There was a lot of work to do. But in the beginning, I was asked to be part of a pilot project to create a microboard for Natalie. And I jumped all over it because it was something that I've heard of before, and knew that was the only direction that we wanted to take for Natalie and our family. So it started out by inviting. Actually, we approached Natalie and said, we're going to have a party. Who does she want to invite? And she made a list. And so there was roughly around 30 people, consisted of our friends who are friends with Natalie, and varied in ages, and some of my nieces and nephews and close friends. So it was just very much a variety of people. And so we just made it a fun evening. When I sent the email with inviting everybody, I explained about Microboards Ontario, what Microboards consisted of, and if they would be willing to come and listen to Diane Peacock speak about microboards, and maybe we can, even if they didn't want to join, their input with how they see Natalie, provide some beautiful feedback, was exactly what we were looking for. So we were going into it open-minded that we may or may not get anybody that wants to be on the microboard. So it was a great evening. Diane created kind of these games that would bring out Nat's gifts and fears and everything we looked at. So we had a great evening. And then from there, we talked to Natalie again on who she would like to be part of her microboard. And, Nat didn't have the concept of what a microboard was. So we tried to explain the best we could. But it was basically a group of friends and family that was going to take care of her, forever. And anyway, so we came up with the group. So her sister and her brother-in-law, Natalie's a member. We have a cousin, or not one of Nat's cousins, and his significant other, and then a friend, someone who grew up with Natalie, like with our kids. So in the beginning, it was very challenging because we met every month. The first year is it's a stress year. It was for us, but if I can have fun with it, like I know it's a very stressful time. What we did too is we thought it would be good for us to explain to the microboard exactly what Natalie went through right from my pregnancy to her diagnosis with a label and everything. So, and then challenges she had throughout the schools and everything. I think it was really important for them to have the true picture of who Natalie is. And it really helped And to this day, it's a beautiful friendship that has occurred. And when we're together without the microboard, they really engage more with Natalie. Not that they ever ignored her, but they have more natural conversations with her. So I found that to be really beautiful. So I think that's about it. Like, I'm sure there'll be questions.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about Nat's microboard. There will be lots of questions coming right up, but Wendy, if you wanted to give a little introduction, that would be great.
Sure, happy to do that. Doug and I have two daughters, Evie and Claire. Evie is the individual in our family who has a microboard, and the rest of us are all part of that microboard. When we started to look at developing a microboard, it was 2017, and we did a lot of talking about what it could look like, and also talking with Evie about she how she could understand what a microboard was and the role that it would play in her life. So we worked on that, I think, for a good while. And then when the pandemic started, we thought there's so many things that we cannot do right now, but this is a great time to dig in and get a microboard started. So our microboard, we invited people to the table. We invited, so Evie chose her sister, her dad, and a cousin who was already part of a network that Evie has had since she was about 18, and myself. So the family and the cousin, and then we have two other people in the network who I'm going to say they're people that we wanted to intentionally deepen our relationships with. They're people who are in community that we were starting to get to know, that we just thought, oh, they've got the values, they've got all of the important pieces, and they were quite interested in getting to know Evie. So our microboard is made up of those two community people, the four of us in the family, and a cousin. Evie's independent facilitator, Rachel, is part of our meetings as well, and helps Evie to understand better some of what happens within the microboard meetings, and helps her prepare a little update every time we have a meeting. So we're meeting now about probably about 4 or 5 times a year. One of those times is purely social, and it's a together day that we have with Evie's network, the microboard, and also her paid support. So it's like the whole team. Yeah, and I would say that we're taking the slow road. We are spending a lot of time, have since 2021, trying to understand more about microboards, trying to understand how we want our microboard to be. And I think that the people, the others in the microboard would say this has been a great time of learning for them about how our family does things, what is important to Evie, how Evie wants to be in her life as the future unfolds. And so we are kind of settled with that right now, that those areas of relationship development and sharing the information that Doug and I have about parenting Evie and all the pieces of that. That's a big part of what our focus is. The other big part of the focus, which goes hand in hand with this, is developing a caregiver guide, so that a lot of what's important in Evie's life is documented somewhere and shared with the microboard. So that's another big focus for us right now. That's all I'll say at this point.
Okay, thank you so much, Wendy. I really appreciate that. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. I don't know if anybody else noticed the red marks. You did. Okay, that's the first time that has ever happened in my life. So give me one quick second to see if I can call that back up. Apologies, everybody. Good old technology. So let's try this again. All right. Okay. Let's proceed. Thank you again, Carol and Wendy, for all of the information that you just provided us. All right. So on to our question period. And some people have many connections, others just have a few. And, you know, some may need to put more thought into who to ask and how to start building those relationships. It's really a lot to consider. So one moment, please. I do not want that to keep happening. So I am just going to do one quick thing. All right. Okay. So Wendy, Carol, Kelly, do you have any advice on this process?
I could start a little bit regarding that. So I think the biggest question is to not assume that you don't have the relationships, but really spend the time in digging deep. And what I found has been helpful for lots of families that I worked with is actually sitting down and mapping out who's in the person's life and what kind of relationship they have with a person, but also identifying maybe a person and people that they spend time with in the community, in the places and spaces where they spend time, which might not be with you. So a lot of families see their children with them through their eyes and only consider those people that they too are witnessing the relationships with. But your sons and daughters spend time in their community with more people than just you. So asking their support workers if they have relationships with people in the community. Maybe if you have a facilitator that's working with you, identifying with a facilitator, having them spend time with them in their community and identifying those possible relationships that might just be blossoming. Facilitators are also great for fostering those potential relationships. For example, if they're bringing them to a program that they really enjoy, the facilitator would notice who is spending more time approaching the person more and paying attention and seem to connect with them. And maybe that facilitator could start with a very small ask of, for example, going to Tim Hortons after with the person and the facilitator, et cetera, to see if that they could help them foster those relationships. So I guess my biggest piece of advice is don't assume that your relationships and what you've witnessed as their relationships are their only relationships, and having a third eyes view, so from support workers and other people in their lives, is helpful and important when you're looking at possible relationships in the person's life.
Thank you, Kelly. That's all really important information for everybody to learn. And Wendy, Carol, would you like to share how you may have begun the process?
One of the things that that I think is really important is that we as parents learn how to identify our kids' gifts. And we do that, right? But sometimes when we're thinking about our kids with disabilities, it's the deficits that we sometimes see, or the deficits that we're most self-conscious about when we're presenting our kids to other people. And so I think one of the best things that happened to me years ago was learning about what it means to see people through a gifts lens, and how identifying people's gifts allows us to present them in a whole different way to their community. And so when inviting people to be part of a network or a microboard, presenting it like a great opportunity to share um, uh, an important part of life with this person who is what funny, or very caring, or somebody who likes a lot of action, or to be able to describe our kids in terms of their gifts helps us to remind ourselves that we're not asking somebody to step up for an onerous task. We're inviting them to be part of a great opportunity. And I think that's really different.
Thanks for sharing that. And that is one of the questions that we have in the future. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how other people may respond to, that feeling of making the ask, which is why we are all here tonight with clear screens now. Sorry about that, everybody. Our Zoom was acting up. So we will move on to the next question. So families often say that they have no one to ask, and that's totally fair. But sometimes you have to try and look at the world with a new lens and at some new connections. So Carol, Kelly, Wendy, any advice about who to ask? Who did you ask?
For us, we have I have a large family, so it was, send that invite there, but it was, Natalie has really gravitated to our friends that are our age, and it's just been very natural friendship with Natalie. So she was able to make her own list. But I know, talking with some families, when they would say they don't have anybody, then all of a sudden we'd get talking, and it was like, oh yeah, an old support worker who, is still interested but doesn't have time to do the support. Well, then there you go. There's a connection that you can throw out an invitation and see what their thoughts are. But yeah, when Kelly talked about the community, exactly, like her Nat has a excellent rapport. She has a blast getting pampered at the hairdresser. Like there's so many different people that you just don't think of. And before we actually create, like Natalie lives in her own home now. So, and she has quite a few support staff. They've brought her to their home. So now her friendship base is enormous. So, we didn't have that at the time of when we started the microboard, but yeah, and like Wendy said too, like sometimes you don't want to impose on anybody because you're not sure how they're going to take it, but you just take the leap of faith, and if they do, great. If they don't, then you accept that as well.
Right, for sure. So it's important to, think about talking to other people outside of your own families and your own friends. Sometimes that's where you need to explore.
Yeah, and one thing when I work with people who are able to express and understand who they'd like in their circle, that we do is I put it in very simple terms, because we're talking about a microboard, which is a little bit different than a circle. But at the end of the day, that microboard's role is to support that person with finding their voice, helping them with informed decisions, etc. So one of the things that I say is, if you had to build a team and choose people on your team, or people that have your back, that that you trust, that you know that they'll always have your best interest. Who would those people be? So for those people that can understand those concepts, that's great. And remember, for those who have a little bit more of a need to communicate some of their wants and needs, using things like pictures. So going through picture albums and looking at like a little bit of their history and allowing them to kind of remember who might have been in their life and could again be in their life. And like I think either Wendy or Carol mentioned, left not because they don't want to be part of their life, but because they have other commitments and couldn't commit to, every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evening, but would commit to, once a month or once every 3 months, attending a meeting and supporting them in making those informed decisions. So thinking that way as well, and using the same tools you use with them in making informed decisions in every other part of their life, cues and pictures, etc.
Thanks, Kelly. Oh,
I
Wendy,
like
did
to-
you? Yeah.
Sorry, I can add something. Just thinking that it's good to maybe not predetermine ahead of time who would be a good microboard member or not a good microboard member. I mean, we understand that this is a long-term entity, and that Carol mentioned something about friends of parents. And I think probably because a microboard is kind of a live organism, it's not going to stay the same forever, right? It's a board of directors where people have terms. And so to choose, you might choose people who are able to help the microboard get up and started and start the whole process, but may not stay forever. So it's not like you're trying to choose people who are signing, in blood for the rest of the life of that individual. If you've got people who can make a good start, then you will attract others down the road.
And one final thing, sorry, Kira, before moving on, is the person doesn't have to live necessarily within the geographic region. With technology, the people can live anywhere because we're able to use Zoom, Meets, etc., to make the meetings work. So not limiting yourself to people who are in town. A lot of people have family members who live abroad, and that's okay as well.
Very good points. So yeah, much like life, the microboard itself is very fluid. People can come and people can go, and they can be your next door neighbor, or they can live on the other end of the country. So those are some people that you can ask. So the next question for everybody is, who should typically be doing this asking?
For us, it was Henry, my husband, and I sent the email out to everybody. But again, it was chatting with Natalie. But as far as her being able to send that out, it wasn't an option. So I think there's a variety of way. It all depends on your own situation. The way we did it obviously worked for us, and I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. But we'll see what the others say.
And we also, I think I did the ask, with the understanding that we talked about it. We talked about those, who we were going to ask, as a group, and with Evie, and I was kind of Evie's ambassador. So, I would say I'm here on behalf of Evie to have a little chat with you about her microboard, and present an invitation that you may be interested in. So yeah, trying to keep her at the center, but also, using, I think Doug and I absolutely used and Evie's facilitator was part of that conversation. You know, we would present ideas, we would present people to Evie, and she could say yes or no.
I'm just going to give a tip for one of the things I do, because I created quite a few microboards in 2018, I believe it was, through an initiative with the ministry. And a lot of the families were really nervous about the ask and weren't quite sure what they were asking and etc. So we actually, I developed a bit of a script with ideas in terms of what a microboard is and what it isn't. And everyone has a different idea of what their microboard would entail. So some people meet, twice a year, some people meet quarterly. At the very beginning, like Carol said, it's a little bit more work because you're creating a lot of the bylaws, et cetera, and developing those relationships within microboard members. So you want to make sure that you're all aligned in terms of values, et cetera. But creating as a facilitator, creating those scripts and that information to provide alongside the verbal ask for the families really made them feel a lot less nervous about the ask and made their ask more clear to the people who were having a conversation with them. And the one thing that we did kind of coach everybody with is there will be questions. We're all learning together. So, knowing that this isn't, as Wendy said, necessarily a lifelong commitment. If it doesn't end up being the right commitment for you, you can change your mind. People come and go, but we're obviously only asking people who we feel are more committed than others to do that.
Thanks, everybody, for weighing in on that question.
Kira, we
yeah.
do have a question in the chat.
Oh, yes. So,
Mark.
well, we've got a few.
Cool. Two.
Yeah, while we're on this topic, I guess, Kelly, what exactly do independent facilitators do, and what is the cost for their services?
So a facilitator basically supports the person, and Wendy, you'll be a great person to answer this. And I think Carol, you have a facilitator as well. But the person basically is almost, I call them the anchor for the individual, the person that they'll be continuing to go to who understands them well, who gets to know what their wants and needs are, and who almost supports them in identifying new opportunities, but mostly helps them foster new relationships and new opportunities to be involved in their community. Almost like a little bit of a project manager, executive assistant is what I sometimes call myself when I work with some of the people who are quite independent. They want to know what I could do for them. I do whatever they need to have done, and I help them live their best life. The cost of a facilitator varies from person to person, but if you go on the Partners for Planning website, there is a lot of facilitators there. I've seen some as low as $50 an hour, and some quite a bit higher, but they would let you know upfront what their cost is. They should enter into a formal contract with you, and you can use Passport's funding to pay for facilitation costs.
All right. And we have one quick ask about, would you be willing to share the script? It helps as a starting framework to have something to build upon.
I can give it to Microboards Ontario, Kira, and kind of have it as one of your resources that you can keep on there. Karen, I'm not sure if I already provided it, but if I didn't, I will send those over. It's 2 pages. One is making the ask, a script, and the other one is what is a microboard. Just quick kind of point forms for people.
Okay, thanks so much, Kelly. And you're okay if we send that out to the group, or? Yeah, okay, amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody so far for asking some great questions. And now I have another question. So for those of you who did the asking, were you nervous?
I sure know lots of parents who are. Sometimes families will use independent facilitators to do the ask as well, because that means that that there's a little bit of distance between. Perhaps the independent facilitator is easier to say an honest yes or no to than the parent. And facilitators are very used to making the ask. but I would say that I'm going to go back to what I said before about feeling like I was really clear about why this was a great opportunity for people. And that if people were saying no, it was going to be an honest, I wanted it to be an honest no. I didn't want anybody to say yes and then, or no, and then, have changed their mind later in the short term. But I feel like as long as it's almost a conversation you have with a mirror, you sort of practice it out. But I think if you are sure of the gifts that your son or daughter brings to this world, what a wonderful thing to invite somebody to be part of their lives in this way. And maybe that's the beginning of the work, is finding your way to that place, so that you're then able to reach out to others to become involved.
Yeah.
I was definitely nervous. I think because you don't want to impose on people, but once you start describing what the microboard is all about, and it's, and I think as they start to get a clearer view, then, then I felt easier in regards to the ask. But I had to step back and think, okay, if they say no, then I have to respect their decision. It could be that just that the timing isn't fit for them. But yeah, I was nervous.
Totally fair. But you got it done. That's the important part. So thank you, everybody, for bringing that up. And next, I think it's human nature to have a fear of rejection. So what happens if people say no? What do you do?
Try? No, I just, no, like I said before, you just thank them for their time, and then move on. We were very lucky that we didn't have anybody that said no, but some families have encountered that. So, it's not to feel, I think you don't want to feel negative in any way. It's nothing against your child. It's nothing against you. It's just respecting that friend or whoever it may be, that they're just not ready at that time. And then maybe just ask them if they want to stay connected to microboards in some way, that maybe later on. And if they still say no, then you respect that too.
I love what you said there, Carol, in terms of they might not be ready at that time, because what I have found is that a lot of people have other things going on in their life that they may not have shared with you. And so that moment in time of that ask was not the right time for them. And because they're aware of their own kind of needs, and they're not going to be a great contributor to your microboard, it's not the right time for them. But what I found is they might come back later in a couple of years when that moment in their life has passed and when they're better able. So for example, somebody might be caring for elderly parents and they have a lot on their plates. They're not going to be the best microboard director at that time of their life. They still really like that person and want to have a relationship with them and want to remain in their circle of support. But to be a microboard director would just tip them over the edge in terms of their commitments right now as a person. That's just an example.
Okay. So that is how you deal with this. It might not be the right time. I think that's a good thing to remember, so you don't get discouraged, because we never know what people have going on in the background either.
I would just add to don't take it personally.
Right.
You want people to be comfortable enough with you to be honest about their answer. So So that's a good thing if they're able to say no.
Yeah, and that honesty can build trust, which is really what you're hoping to do, what everyone's hoping to do through the microboard.
Yeah.
So we already kind of covered this a little bit, but I was wondering if you may be able to speak a bit more to this question. How do you avoid feeling like you're bothering people or adding more responsibility to their already busy lives in this very busy world?
I think one of the things that that we emphasize is that this is a team. This is a group of people, and that we are inviting them to be one part of this team of people. And so that we're not asking one person to shoulder big responsibilities, but we value their voice. We value their the way that they are in relationship with Evie, and for her, we want to develop the best team, and so we're reaching out to them in that because of that. But I not like some people would say, oh no, I'd rather get together and play cards with her than sit in a meeting, right? And that's okay too. When you're inviting people, you're inviting them for perhaps other roles as well. But I think the team focus really takes the pressure off people feeling like they are going to be signing up for an onerous task.
Right. And it's a group effort, right? Everything doesn't just fall on one person. It's everybody working together with the person who the microboard is for. So it really can become a nice environment. And people enjoy going and contributing. So just keep that in mind, everybody.
And for some people, it's actually a piece of their life, a piece of their community. So for me, I'm part of a microboard for a person I've known since he was born. And for me, it's just expanded my relationship. So that's important to kind of mention as well, that maybe you're enhancing their life and not at all being a burden. It's actually making their life a little bit more full, new opportunities, new connections, et cetera, for themselves as well, even though they're a microboard director.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's definitely a reciprocal relationship, and everything gets returned. So if we look at expectations, or what a director's role would be on a microboard, how would you, or how have you clearly explained what's expected of people when they join the microboard or the circle or network?
I think just being really honest with them that it's going to be a journey for everybody. I mean, even the parents and the individual that the microboard's for, like everybody, it's brand new. Um, and the facilitator explained the first year would be the most challenging, and she was right. Now we don't after the first year we don't have a facilitator. We feed off of the microboard, but we also obviously we feed off of Nad, who pretty much tells us, yep, 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 and but you try and um, navigate, feel her little cues on what she does, on what you think she might like. But we also depend on her support staff. We have regular meetings or quarterly meetings. And if we also have a communication via messenger that people will put stuff on. So we get a lot of feedback from there. We bring that to the microboard, and so it's just a journey of, if it gets to be too much, then you let us know and we back off. And, we don't want it to be very, very structured. in the sense where we can't have fun, because it is a journey with Natalie. And she's just very bubbly and our social butterfly and loves to party and then go to bed early. So we just roll with it.
Great. Yeah, the fun part is so important to mention, right? Because when you're setting things up, there is some paperwork and some legal things to attend to. But after all of that is through, the fun is so important. And I think was it you, Carol, who has a director of fun, or no? Kelly, was it someone you knew?
We
Am
had
I
a
making this up?
group, a team, and I'm not going to mention the person's name, but in that team, there was a person who was in charge of basically creating this social fun. So every member of the team had kind of a role, and it was based on their own personality. This person loved organizing outings and events. So should organize like axe throwing, but should reach out to everyone and say, hey, here's 3 options of what we can do based on, the person's feedback. These are things that they would love to do with you guys, and to send out an invitation. So it became part of her role, not the facilitator's role, to kind of foster the relationships among the team, which was really fun. And among the larger team, not only the Microboard, but the circle of support, which was quite large. It was 18 people, which was really great.
Wow. Yeah, it's nice to have people there who actually enjoy the organizing part. So to keep it all moving smoothly and to have a fun time. So we do have a question, and I think this is probably a good time to answer it. So what are each of the members' duties? So I'll just say you can assign a chair who would be like the leadership of the overall microboard. There are a couple other roles that you can assign more formally, like a secretary or a treasurer. And Kelly, I think I will defer to you to any other roles that may exist, or if you wanted to explain the secretary and treasurer a little bit.
Yeah, when we have a chair, I usually actually suggest a co-chair as well, just in case the chair for any reason can't kind of manage the agenda and get that organized in time. I do like a treasurer, because really many times the Microboard is started when there may be government funding to flow through that Microboard to support the employment of some of the supports, because they are the employer of record. So somebody to kind of bring forth the quarterlies, basically the financials every quarter is important. And a treasurer, a secretary, somebody to keep minutes is really important as well. So to keep us on track. The way that we used to run the minute piece of it for the Microboards that I was in is we had a Google Drive going, and the Google Drive was a shared drive between all Microboard members. And we had each agenda set up in there, et cetera, just like any other corporate kind of agenda keeping piece. But if everyone has roles, it's really clear. I find that people love having roles, because with roles, you know what you're supposed to do, and it's very clear in terms of the boundaries of what you could do. But it doesn't mean that you're only in those roles. It means that you take leadership and you're managing that area. So for example, taking minutes, but everybody else would still be responsible for reviewing the minutes, making sure it's correct, making any changes, etc. But just like any team, it's really great to match a person's skill set with the role they're taking on. So for example, in one of the Microboards that I'm on, one of the individuals is an accountant and works for a bank, and he's obviously the treasurer for that individual because it comes easy for him, and he enjoys it.
Great. And yeah, it could be a worthy exercise to talk with the members of the Microboard to just, if they're not accountants or not lawyers, just to see what their interests are, if you don't already know, and see what roles they might want to take on as well. All right, so coming to the end of our questions, we've learned more about your microboards, more about your experience with them, but now we're going to talk about how the connections that have been built, how have those benefited yourselves, the person who the microboard is for, as well as microboard members as a whole. So what benefits have you seen from having a microboard set up?
I can speak to that. I think just from a parent's perspective, um, having a team is um, it is so important. Um, there are so many ways in which we're limited right now, with developing a future plan for our kids and with our kids. There's so many things that we don't have access to, the housing being one of the big examples, right? But so this is a positive and possible move to build a team that will hold the questions that you as parents hold and probably ruminate on every day. And that to have a supportive team makes such a difference. And I wanted to give an example of that. Um, I feel like this was a very stressful winter for us in our family, for lots of different reasons. And I'll say that the state of the world was was one of those. Um, and when we had our Together Day in April, we had some kind of more structured conversations about how to support Evie as she moves on, with the understanding that we don't have a system that's really going to hold her. We don't know what will be offered, to her as Doug and I age and are no longer able to care for her. And so that I was very anxious about that situation. And what I got back from that conversation was a lot of reassurance that this is why we are together doing this. One of the members of the Microboard said, this is why I show up, because I'm so interested in what you're doing, in how you're trying to create a good life for Evie, and we are here to support you regardless. So she said, I see us as your succession plan. And you can't, there's lots that you don't know, but you do know that the Microboard is going to be there to hold your values and to hold that relationship with Evie, and her voice as central. And so for me, that was really reassuring. It was to know that I could talk to the people in the Microboard, and also that they had voiced their support for us as a family was that was like the best thing. So I know that those relationships in the Microboard have really been wonderful for everybody. And I feel like we spend about half an hour, 40 minutes at the beginning of every meeting catching up with people, so that we're going to create more of a web than like a wheel with Evie at the center and the spokes. We want to kind of interweave people's lives. And so we see those relationships developing amongst the Microboard members. And it's really a beautiful thing. And I think it strengthens the Microboard's effectiveness and support for us too.
Carol.
Yeah, it not, I guess I'll give you an example what happened early on with our Microboard. Natalie had met this young lady, and we thought, Natalie was also getting ready to move into her own house. And we thought, wouldn't that be a nice, idea for Nat and her friend to live together? And I guess because as the mom heart, I was just, I guess, crushed that she would not be living with anybody, that she didn't have anybody to love her in the same way as, her mom and dad and her sister and brother-in-law. And I just thought it would be a great idea. Natalie and her got along quite well. We started talking more. about it. And then when it was brought to the microboard, they actually did not think it was going to be a great idea. And as a mom, I was just crushed. Like, I couldn't believe it. But I had to stop and think, this is why we have the microboard. So I was talking through my heart, my emotions, what her life was going to be like in the future. They were thinking logically and started, explaining to me that Natalie doesn't do well in loud surroundings. Natalie doesn't always do well with a lot of people around her. And with the house, that's exactly what would happen. So that was my first early lesson of the value of a microboard. Because if I didn't have that microboard, I would have made a decision solely, I guess, I'm trying to think of the word, but like for my own, instead of thinking of Natalie. So that early on lesson, and they had to keep talking to me about it because I was having a very difficult time accepting that. But again, the microboard was clear, and they were absolutely 100% correct. Natalie would not have survived, would not be doing as well as she is if she would have had somebody. So it was a lesson for me to go, there's other ways of being loved. It doesn't mean she has to have that extra body in that house to get the love that she does. And I know along our journey, sometimes families are told, keep your support staff at a distance, don't have that connection, that close connection with them. But they truly are her best friends. Like, they take her everywhere. They take her to family events. They've introduced her to more people. So by having the staff and the microboard together, it really has made that blossom. But not only for Natalie, it also has helped her younger sister. So our youngest, Rachel, has a family of her own, and she thought she would have to care for Natalie after we could no longer do it. And I, I, I thought we made it clear to her that the responsibility wasn't going to be solely on you. Now that the microboard's there, that stress has gone. Yeah, she'll still have some responsibilities, but I want her to enjoy Natalie more as her sister. So that relationship has definitely blossomed. I think it helps that they're a little bit older and Nat's not picking on her as much. But yeah, the benefit of the microboard, it is so worth the first year that you have so many meetings, going through your bylaws, trying to tell your story, that that your child, that everybody truly understands your child. It is so worth it, because now I know, my husband and I know, that microboard is there for her long after we're gone, and potentially after maybe her sister's gone. We don't know what the future holds, but my gosh, it was the best thing. And the people on the microboard are truly enjoy being on the board. So enjoy the journey.
Thanks, Carol. So lots of benefits from both Wendy and Carol. So it's clear, that having a microboard is very beneficial all around. So we're just going to reiterate some tips for asking, and then we will get into some questions at the end. So Kelly, do you want to just go through
Yes.
the tips, and Wendy and Carol, feel free to jump in whenever.
Yeah, I'm just walking us through what we've been talking about all evening. So basically, you start with making a list of all those people that have been in their life, through their life, and had their back. And then determine who from those lists might be people that they'd like to invite. I love Carol's idea of kind of having a big gathering and everybody there to kind of reconnect and see whether those relationships still feel really good for the person, and then allowing that person to kind of move forward to identify which of that larger group of people they'd like to invite to be in the smaller Microboard, because the larger group is their circle or their network of support and friendship. And the smaller team, which needs to be at least 5 people, the Microboard, is a smaller subgroup of that circle of support and friendship. Telling your story, which is how Wendy and Carol started, sharing your vision, your ideas for your son and daughter's future, being open and curious to what other people's thoughts might be so that they could provide you feedback. But starting with sharing your story, sharing your intention and what you hope the Microboard can provide you, and your vision for your son or daughter's future with them at the table and alongside them is going to be really important. The goal of the Microboard usually is exactly what Carol and Wendy said: relationships, holding that information for you and for that person long after the mom and dad are there. So maintaining that history and the values that were important to you, and the intention of having the best life possible, which is usually what all of us want for our children. Letting people know that their involvement is valuable, irregardless of how little it feels. Like sometimes, honestly, when I'm on a Microboard for a family that I've known for years, I feel it's so minimal. I'm only sitting in meetings 3 times a year. I'm seeing the person in between, but I really, as a Microboard member, sometimes feel that it's such a small thing that I'm doing. So acknowledging to that, those people that, you know, what you're doing, even though it feels small, is a huge piece to our son or daughter and to us in knowing that their future is going to be maintained, and our vision and all the work we've put in so far to have them live their best life will continue to happen. So acknowledging people as they go in terms of what they're doing and how they're contributing to the Microboard and to the person's life is important. I'll let you flip to the next page. Be clear about what you're asking. So that was the piece. That's why I created a bit of a script and an ask. So, you know, how many meetings? How long are the meetings? What do the meetings look like? Do people have roles? These kind of discussions that we've been having today are going to be questions and discussions that your Microboard members may have. And you don't necessarily have all the answers, because part of forming of your Microboard will include sitting down with a full team and making those decisions together. So the Microboard team decide together, how often are we meeting? What do those meetings look like? You know, where do those meetings take place? I will always remember when we went, and I think you were, actually, I don't know if you were there, Karen, Microboards in Vela, so in BC. The stories the head of Microboards Vela would tell about some of their Microboard meetings, that their AGM meeting was, the notes were taken on a napkin in a restaurant because that's where the person wanted their meeting to happen. So basically the person keeping minutes was just writing down notes on a napkin in the restaurant because they just wanted to have the meeting in a casual place where it was fun for everybody, and then keep going on with their day. And that was considered an AGM meeting, and that was sufficient for the corporate bylaws to have the notes taken and then translated by email. Making sure that you are expressing the benefit that your son or daughter is having with their commitment, but also making sure that the people are aware of what benefit they're having. Again, a lot of the times we don't realize how much of value it is for a person to be involved in a circle. That person themselves, we don't know, might be quite isolated. Their life might be full of stress, and this is their moment to relax and be with other, you know, adults and like-minded people who also value community, who value inclusion, who value, you know, the same things that maybe other people on that team value. So it is usually a mutually reciprocal, beneficial relationship. So continuing to highlight those kind of things when you're making the ask is going to be really important as well. To identify the person's strengths, to identify the person you're asking's strengths. You know, I know you're an accountant, you're really good at numbers. We would really value having somebody who's good at numbers at the table because we're not so great at that, right? Those kind of things need to be said. And finally, having it open-ended, allow the person the opportunity to say no. They might not be ready right now, but if they are ready, be ready with a time and date for your first meeting is one of the key things that I tell families. Close that deal, close that door so that people know what their next step is. So great, I'm happy you want to be involved. Our first meeting is going to be at the end of October. There's 2 dates we're choosing from. Which date might work best for you, right? So really closing that is going to be important.
Oh, Kelly, you're on
Yeah.
mute. Go ahead.
You want me to keep going in this area as well, or?
Yes.
Okay. So if somebody is unable to commit, I think I spoke about this earlier, it might not be anything other than their own things going on in their life. It is okay and actually really beneficial for a person to say no. It's a learning opportunity for us as individuals and for our son and daughters. And we could reframe it for them as well and saying, you know what? Jane isn't ready to do this right now because she has other things going on in her life. Isn't it great that she was able to say no? Teaching boundaries, modeling boundaries. Those are good things to happen as well. So as long as we reframe the no for the person and for ourselves in a positive way, which it usually is, then it feels fine. It's about them. It's not about your situation. It might not be the right time. They might want to join later. So keep an open mind in terms of that as well. And not taking it personally, making sure the person support, the person, the individual who is the center of the microboard also knows not to take it personally. And maybe at the end of the day, I'm a true believer in what is meant to be is meant to be. So it might not have been the greatest fit to begin with at that time because of what they're going on in their life. You will find the right people with time and patience and commitment. You will build a circle and you will be able to develop a microboard with time.
Thanks, Kelly. So we have a couple of quotes here. I know our time is counting down. It's almost 8 o'clock, but this is very small on my screen and my eyes are not as good as they once were. So if it is bigger on your screens, Wendy, if you wanted to read the one about Evie, if it's too small, we can just move on to the next. But these are positive quotes about how good things were for the microboard. All right. So if anybody,
Okay. So I can do
are
that.
you
I
still
just,
here?
for some reason, I just lost my camera.
Good old technology.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Can you see it or should we move on?
I can sort of see it. Okay, it says, I love Evie and want to contribute to a safe and secure future for her through this microboard. I also love her family and wanted to support them in their goal and establishing a safe and secure future for Evie. I was honored and pleased to be asked.
Thanks, Wendy. I think that these quotations are a nice to follow the slide where we just talked about if somebody's unable to commit, you can see all the benefits from these quotations. And Carol, take it away for Nats.
Nat's microboard has provided her with the opportunity to live her best life. It's a small group that supports her with her dreams and needs within her own home and community. As parents, knowing the microboard will continue long after us, it's a total sense of peace.
Great. Thank you for ending on a positive note. And thank you, Wendy, Carol, and Kelly, and to everybody in the audience for all of your great questions. I can see that there's lots of interest in certain technical aspects of microboards. So we can answer some of those as we move forward if they haven't been answered yet. But Thank you to everyone for attending, and Wendy and Carol for providing your personal experiences with your family, Kelly for all of your professional expertise and also your involvement with microboards on many different levels. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I just wanted to quickly talk about a couple of programs that we have either already started or coming up. Because there does seem to be quite a lot of interest in the chat. So we have what is called our Microboard Support Initiative, and this is for families that have already made the ask. So they have at least 5 unpaid directors who are committed to the process of creating a microboard with and for your loved one. So it's we're finishing off cohort number 1 right now, and what the cohort entails are there is online access to 8 different modules where you'll learn a lot about building a microboard, and then in the second half of the modules you'll learn a lot about the more formal aspects, more about governance, about the employer of record, finances, and bylaws and things like that. So Microboards Ontario really provides a lot of support throughout this project, and we're going to be starting cohort 2 in the summer. It's almost full, so we will be accepting applications for cohorts 3 and 4 later in the year. But if you have any interest, feel free to email Karen or I, and we would be happy to give you some more details. Somebody has got their hand up, so if you wanted to take yourself off of mute, we can all listen to your question and help out.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for listening. Thank you. This is the very first time I'm with this group actually, but Kelly Casey knows me because I had her facilitation years before during COVID, I believe, with the very first or the second independent housing facilitation. So I had a privilege and honored to have a couple of emails also. A live conversation with her. Okay, so I know her. I was so happy to see her live here. Okay, few things which came into my mind. So very first thing you were asking, you were talking about ask. So I was wondering, okay, so you have a number of people in your mind. So all those things, what she told, I accept. But I would say that a lot of times our wishes and our actions may not match. So for that reason, if we have a template or if we give a questionnaire, the person will correctly know, am I the right person to be a member in the microboard? So that's one thing which came to my mind. Second thing which came to my mind was when you were talking about microboard, it directly reflected me on time and relationship. So when I thought of time and relationship, you are coming up at a certain point in life, the microboard is coming into play. When? After school years. When the person with special needs going into DSO's hands. No, I was thinking of it. It was connecting me to IPRC and IEPs. So when IPRCs and you have a number of people who coming into the person's life to identify this person into the school board, in the school system actually, where this person with a disability has to be identified. So I was wondering, rather than going into the age of 24 or 30 or 18 or if these microboards are set up at the very beginning, like whoever, because it would change, the people will change, but the center person with a disability will be constant. So that should be the setting up process, what I was thinking. So we wouldn't go for ask because it will naturally evolve. Things would come into play. And those people who have a lot of interaction and knows about this individual from the early child onwards, like the educators, like the teachers, like the, so the school board, they should be the, and so once they are out from the school, everything is set in place. The entire life is set, this is how it's going to be, this is where it's going to be, this is how it would be, it would look like, rather than just, So this came to me just, why should we wait? Why should we go for? Why should we behind people? Why it's going to be? So I thought of sharing this with you, and probably because we all are in the same boat, sailing with same results, so. With my son, I have seen a lot of things which the DSO have come in place. I have thought about it years before. So these things I was wondering, probably, a thought-provoking suggestions or recommendations, which I thought to share. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I guess regardless of the age, the best time to start is now. So I do agree, that if the concept of microboards were around many years ago, over 40, because microboards are actually 40 years old, but they are relatively new in Ontario. But I agree, doing that work earlier would help as well. So Karen, I will let you talk about our next initiative that's coming out, because it does focus more on the younger families and reaching out to people, who are younger. So I'm just going to stop the recording while we ask the questions. But Karen, if you wanted to speak a little bit about microboards for young families, that would be great.
Great, thank you. So we are, as Kira said, we are launching a program